Hey everyone, Joe Waxman here, and I wanted to make a video about why I no longer consider myself a macrobiotic practitioner. In shorthand, why I no longer consider myself macrobiotic. Macro practitioner, people who practice macrobiotics call themselves macrobiotic as a shorthand. I mean, obviously, you're not macrobiotic, but it's a way of saying that you practice macrobiotics. Anyway, why I no longer consider myself macrobiotic. So let's start from the beginning. I obviously grew up macrobiotic to a macrobiotic family, born and raised. My parents studied with the Kushis in the 60s and 70s before I was born, late 60s, early 70s before I was born, and then after I was born also, obviously. I was born in 76. And let's see. So I grew up in a macrobiotic household, in macrobiotic study houses. That's what we called them in the early days, where there would be like one teacher or I guess teachers who owned a house, and then students of macrobiotics would come and live and study, and they studied very intimately, up close and personal, like on a daily basis. That's why they're called study houses. They were pretty popular in the 70s and 80s. And so I grew up with a lot of different people. My father hosted macrobiotic conferences along with other people in the summer camps in the early days. And then there are many macro camps that we would go to every year, macro summer camps, summer conferences they were called. I studied with my father. I also, when I finished high school, I went to the Kushi Institute in Beckett, Massachusetts. I lived at the Kushi house for a little while. Remember, the Kushis were Japanese, Michio and Evelyn Kushi. They were Japanese teachers, the main teachers on the East Coast. Michio was very prolific, taught a lot, very brilliant man in many ways, wrote many books, and had pretty moderate success, moderate to, well, I guess it depends how you define it, but he wrote a lot of books, and he was quite well known among a certain niche group, I guess you could say. And macrobiotics had a pretty strong influence, especially the early days. It gained notoriety for being able to cure cancer or having cured cancer in certain cases, which is real and documented. And there have been many success cases from macrobiotics. Macrobiotics also spearheaded the natural foods, health food store movement. Before macrobiotics, health food stores were they were like nutrition stores. They didn't have anything to do with food. And I don't want to say that macrobiotics was the only group that did it, but we were one of the main ones, right? My father started the first health food store in Philadelphia, and many other, macro students started their own health food stores. And not only that, there was no organic food. So a lot of these original health food stores had to solicit farmers to start growing organic food with the promise that they would buy their product, because, you're not going to grow. It's not a good business model to grow something that nobody's going to buy. So you had to have the chain, the supply chain, right? Full supply chain. So the farmers needed a way to make profit. So there was an agreement between the original health food stores and very specific farmers to grow organic foods, which is now it's a huge industry now. So yeah, I was, I studied a lot. I also studied in the Kushi Institute in Amsterdam, and I've been to many of the macro communities around the United States mostly, but yeah, also like the one in Amsterdam. And I mentioned this because it's not like every child who grew up macrobiotic did that. I did it specifically, right? Like I was very into it, and I read a lot of the books. Osawa was the originator of macrobiotics. He came up with the whole philosophy based on traditional Japanese Far Eastern philosophy, right? So yeah, so that's my background essentially. And my father was a teacher, counselor, author, and as you know, that he died recently of cancer. And so that was a big turning point for me. So despite many of the initial successes of macrobiotics has had equally as many long-term failures, you could say, or diseases among long-term practitioners. And it's become pretty much epidemic. It's like scary bad because, you know, and the way I make sense of it is that like macrobiotics is pretty much a restrictive diet, right? And with any restrictive diet, it's not meant for long-term use. Like you can fast, and fasting is wonderful, but if you fast, if you're just like, I'm going to fast for the rest of my life, you're not going to have a good outcome because your body will adapt and you'll get weak and then weaker and then weaker, and then eventually you'll come to some disease of deficiency or something else, you know, maybe a mutation because of whatever, right? Macrobiotics is that. It's essentially a long-term fast because it's a high carbohydrate, low fat, low protein diet. Many practitioners are they want to be vegan on top of that because that's the trend, that's the sort of direction. And the teaching is sort of like, you know, it's pseudo spiritual because it's like, well, you know, it plays into this idea that animal food is bad and bad for spirituality. Therefore, you're pushing yourself more towards the vegan side of things. So even if you're eating a little bit of fish, eventually you're like, oh, I should be more macro and be completely vegan and, you know, cut out all the fish, then we'd be better macros. I'll feel much like a better person, you know, right? So that's the direction. There are a lot of vegan macros, right? The problem, as we know today about veganism, is that protein is vegan protein is much harder to absorb than animal food protein. And some people come up with the argument, well, what about gorillas and elephants? Well, guess what? They eat a phenomenal amount of food. Like a gorilla will eat 50 to 60 pounds of food in a day. Are you going to do that? No. Most of these people are like showing, like, it's a macro trend to show off your plate, and they eat like tiny portions. You know, the ones who actually have some muscle mass eat a lot, right? They eat a lot. And those are usually the ones who grew up with it, who have nothing to prove. They're just like, this is all they know. And they know that if they want to be strong, which, you know, often young people do, they need to eat a lot. So just intuitively, right? And I know these people because I've been around. I'm 46 years old. I spent most of my life in and around macrobiotic communities. So I know I can pinpoint who is, you know, like who has muscles and how much they eat just to get that muscles, because of, if you study nutrition at all, you'll know that it's just the amount of protein that you get from plants. Plant protein is not meant for human. I mean, it's meant for the protein combinations. The amino acids are meant for plants. That's what they're meant for. So you need to eat a lot of them to get the right amounts to build muscle, right? And most people are not. So you're not going to have muscle, right? And then you're not going to have fat. And then fat is necessary for so many things: vitamins D, A, K, and E absorption, right? So you're going to have low fat soluble vitamin absorption because it's very low fat, right? So you can have all kinds of deficiencies right off the bat just from those two things. And then high carb, we know high carb is good for a couple things. It's great for running fast. But how many macros run fast? Like 1%, right? How many macros are like, because the other thing is that the pseudo spiritual philosophy downplays exercise, which is like, it's a recipe for disaster. And like, I mean, if you knew how many macros died of cancer or osteoporosis or heart attack, stroke, or other ailments, you'd just be like shocked long term, right? Like, it's horrible. It's horrifying. You know, and I get some criticism because nobody wants to like be the bearer of bad news. Everyone's like, see, the thing, it's the same with veganism. What happens is that people leave the community, and then they just like keep their head down. They're like embarrassed and they don't talk about it. I'm not that person. Like, I got a lot of heat for criticizing my father, but if anyone is allowed to criticize my father, it's me, because guess what? There wasn't anyone closer to my father than me. Like, period. I mean, I'm not gonna call out anything. I'll just say that. I'm not gonna expose anyone or anything. I'll just say it. There was nobody closer to my father than me. So if there's anyone who can criticize me, him, it's me. And those people who have a problem with it, I'm sorry. Like I could have, curtailed what I said, made him been more sensitive, but still, at the end of the day, I have more right to criticize him than anyone. And I'm not going to just hush up because these things need to be said, right? And a lot of people criticize me for criticizing him. Fine. I still believe I did the right thing. Could I have done a better job? Yes. Overall, I did the right thing. So, and a lot of people thanked me too. So a lot of people got some stuff out of it. Anyways, yeah. So you have this dichotomy of short-term restriction, which can be very beneficial. Any type of restrictive diet, like people coming off the standard American diet, and then they're going to a whole food, natural, plant-based diet that is, even if it's high in carb and low in fat and low in protein, they see improvements initially. Nobody sees improvements long term, right? At best, you could say they're surviving, but nobody is like really doing like wonderfully that I know of. You have some very hardcore individuals who live a very rugged, rustic lifestyle, and maybe they're strong enough to withstand the abuse, but it's still not ideal. It's not optimal, right? They're really just surviving at a sort of plateau because of their personality, their nature. They're just like hardworking, physically active, cold enduring, and they can weather out the physical abuse on their body because it is an abuse. It's not a nutritionally optimal diet at all, and long term it weighs heavy on the body, and I'm going to go into that. So again, carbohydrates are good for two things really. Speed, physical speed. Like if you need to be like a very high intensity athlete, like if you're in the old days, if you're running either towards or from animals, towards animals you want to hunt or away from animals who are hunting you, excellent. Carbohydrates are great. If you're running a race, or a bike race, or swimming, or any of those super high intense physical activities, carbohydrates are wonderful, right? Most macros do like I've mentioned this before, but it's like bad. Like they just sit there doing nothing. Like this is just like the worst people on the planet as far as physical activity. They just suck. Like the macrobiotic community just sucks as far as physical activity. Like I just want to this is my personality. I'm brutal and I'm blunt and I'm honest. Like get up off your lazy ass. You're terrible, right? Like these are just the weakest. I don't like the macrobiotic community as a whole. There are people within it that I like. Most of the macros, I'm like, keep your distance from me. I don't care if you dislike me. That's kind of why I am the way I am, because like I'm really okay with them not liking me. So because I just don't want them to think I like them and then get all like, I just like leave me alone, right? Like we're not on the same level. Right? Okay. And that's not to say that there are not individuals within the macrobiotic community who I really do like or admire or appreciate. There are. So like, but those people, I'm sure I hope they know that I do appreciate, right? So I want to separate the two, and obviously we don't have to agree on everything. I can still respect people. I know I sound like I'm putting out mixed messages, but I'm not trying to. It's just there are people who I like and people who I don't like. But anyway, yeah, long-term restriction is not healthy, especially when it's the same kind of restriction. When you're just doing the same restrictive diet or activity or whatever it is, whatever kind of restriction you're just like carrying it out and you're just like, this is my restrictive diet for forever. That's not going to work. That's not a good healthy mindset, right? Restrictions are meant to be stressors that your body adapts to for a little while. We need to change it up, and there's nothing wrong with getting our nutrition, right? And then like, so this idea, this pseudo spiritual idea, like, oh, animal food is not spiritual, and I know because I had that idea and I had to correct myself. I had to self-correct because I see it was not right. It's very schizophrenic because on the one hand they're like, oh yes, we're more spiritual when we don't eat any animal food. Okay, if that's the case, why don't you join a monastery if you want to be so spiritual? Oh no, not that spirit. No, no. Whoa, hey, hold on, buddy. We're not we're not gonna go join a Zen Buddhist monastery, whatever, right? Some people like to imagine they have, but in reality, no. They're not meditating most of the day. They're not living anywhere near a spiritual lifestyle the way the people who are really devoted. If you're really devoted and you want to be a like Hindu, spiritual, even Christian mystic, Buddhist, whatever your denomination, Sufi, go 100%, go all the way, do it, and then be vegan. Fine, like if you're spending that much time devoted to being a spiritual, disciple, monk, mystic, whatever, good, fine. You probably transform, you'll do some heavy duty alchemical transformation if you're really devoted to it, 100%, through meditation and very spiritual practices. Great. That's not the case. They want to pretend that they're spiritual while not actually living spiritual. Because if you're trying to be in the world, then you need to resonate with worldly things. And that means you need a bit more nourishment to align with people, to be competitive. And that includes animal food, right? So, I mean, we can go down the vegan rabbit hole and talk about all those arguments, but I don't want to. I mean, it's kind of tired and boring, and it's like easily, it's really easy to counter pretty much all the arguments that they put out. It's just not, veganism is they're so arrogant too. I mean, come on. And then all these vegans who are like hyper militant, then they just shut up when they change their mind. They just don't talk about it anymore. They're just like, oops, I was wrong, and I definitely was. I wasn't vegan, but I was outspoken about, I was in that camp. So like, I'm a reformed, recovered, not vegan, but animal. I had a big mouth. I still do, obviously, but at least I'm course correcting, and I'm not just shutting up. I'm not just spouting out the vegan bullshit and then just not saying anything else when I realized errors in my ways. Right? I'm saying I was definitely on the short end of the what is it, intelligence spectrum on that topic. All right, let's keep going. Animal food protein is far more absorbable. Plus, there's so much micronutrients that you get from protein, and muscle is healthy. And animal food allows you to feel deeply nourished and function in the world. And I mean that, like, this is not theoretical, nonsense or whatever. Like, I've firsthand experienced like the difference in my life. Like, it's drastic, it's dramatic. Like, there's a resonance that or dissonance and a resonance that happens when you're really on one side or the other. Like, if you're really restricting animal food and you try and operate in a world that is heavily animal food, you can't function well, you can't compete, and you don't have the energy, and that weighs heavy on the psyche. You do that for years. You're programming yourself, you're conditioning your subconscious mind to say that you cannot compete with other people in this world. And that's a very debilitating, disempowering mindset. It's subconscious because it's constant. You're constantly messaging your subconscious mind, which runs you, which is where we get our, that's where we get our whole paradigm from, our subconscious. You're constantly messaging your subconscious mind that you cannot. It's a negative influence on your subconscious. That's why macros and vegans are underperformers in the world. They're poor and they're underperformers. And I have been my whole life, right? Because of that reason, because it was constantly like, I never had the nourishment and I never had the ability, the energy, and the kind of everything that goes along with having enough nutrition compared to other people, right? They had more physical energy, they had more mental energy, they had, I suffered from brain fog, especially as you get older, due to many things, right? And then it's a constant negative conditioning. on your subconscious mind that I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it, right? I can't build the business, I can't succeed, I can't do what other people are doing, right? Despite my efforts, I'm trying, but it's just not working. I can't do it, I'm not good enough, right? You don't succeed in the world by being overly restrictive like that for years, right? Decades. It's a very negative conditioning element on your subconscious. Very, very, very negative conditioning for your subconscious mind. I'm telling you, this is very important to understand. And so macrobiotic people don't succeed. They're all poor and ineffective in life. And there's a few who, have some moderate success, but not really, not compared to other people who are eating, who embrace animal food as a philosophy. Right. So anyway, okay. Then there's, so the low fat also for the nerves, there's, it's quite, there's that issue too, which, we need enough fat to coat the nerves, and this is very obvious in the macro community. The kind of like the stress levels, the uptightness, the intensity. That's very, very common. That the macros are just like too intense because they don't have enough fat in their diet. Their nervous systems are exposed. If they've some smoke cigarettes, hopefully not anymore, but a lot used to. Alcohol is very prevalent because due to the high stress levels of just being stressed out all the time because of low fat, right? Then they drink alcohol, which is cause and cure. While you're drinking, it's like, oh my God, finally relax. Been so stressed out all day because I haven't eaten any fat, right? So now I have a drink, which further exacerbates the problem. And it's really bad for the brain as well, bad for the nerves, and bad for nutrition, really bad. There have been some very severe cases of mineral depletion, osteoporosis, very severe, right? Like even to the point of death, but not just once. Like I know of one death because of osteoporosis, but I know of several cases of severe osteoporosis. Okay. Then we get to the high carbohydrate and low activity, right? Once again, great for athletes, especially high intensity athletes. Terrible for sedentary lifestyle, which pretty much 99% of macros are convinced that they don't need to do anything except for go for a half-hour walk and maybe some, who knows, Douyin or yoga, or Douin's like self-massage, whatever, just like really, minor stuff. And it's just complete, arrogance in the face of modern nutrition, what we know of now. Like, and none of these, that's the other issue, is that most of these macros are so full of their own BS that they won't even bother to do research. And they're like, well, we know better. And I know this for a fact because I've been around so many of them, and they're just like, they don't know what they're talking about. We're right, they're wrong. And it's so arrogant. And these people are dropping dead like flies. It's horrible. Like my son has only one grandparent left. The other three have died of illness prematurely, all macrobiotic, and the one who's left is in poor health, right? Poorer health than her parents, my mother, right? My grandparents, who did nothing, I've said this before, they did nothing but basically cook cooked food, all, eat everything, home cooked food, not even at the shopping at the health food store, just a wide variety of home cooked food, most of their life, no alcohol, no cigarettes, and they lived well into their 90s, right? In much healthier state than any of my son's grandparents. Okay. Not uncommon. Basically, for long-term health, you're better off not practicing macrobiotics. I mean, that's what statistically is true. That's factual. You're better off for long-term health not practicing macrobiotics, doing nothing, being ignorant, just cooking food at home, having a generally like well-balanced whole food diet, eating everything, you're going to be much, much better off. Okay. High carbohydrate diet. So carbohydrates are fast burning in the body. That's why they support high intensity exercise, right? But they also support very vigorous thinking, mental activity. And that's why they are good for like the hunter-gatherers to start becoming more intellectual and develop civilization. And then you see this trend among macros, this hyper intellectualism, where their mind is constantly being stimulated, and it's constantly among macro groups this overemphasis on thinking, and they just like, it's like, you know, a big circle jerk, excuse my expression, but that's basically when a bunch of macros get together, it's like, oh my god, they're getting high off their own hyper intellectual nonsense. And it really doesn't add up to much. I mean, not to say that there's not some gems within so-called macrobiotics as far as thinking, which I'll get to. There is, right? There's some really nice ways of thinking, and some energetic connections, thoughts, which I'll talk about. But overall, a lot of it's just hyper intellectual nonsense, and like people who just become obsessed with their thinking and thinking that's so important. That's basically becomes their identity. Like, oh, my thinking is so important, and that's what's most important is my thinking. And therefore, if I eat grains, I can think more, and therefore that's why we're going to do the whole macro thing, because it helps me think more. And therefore, that's, you know, it's basically feeding their identity, which is ego. Right? If you study spirituality, you learn to recognize the ego, which I've done. I've studied spirituality, right? And that's it. People identify with all kinds of things. In macrobiotics, they're mainly identifying with their thinking. I think, and they just like, they develop their thinking to a certain, and then they become like, well, my thinking is really superior. I have to keep developing it. You know, like anything and anyone, like, you know, bodybuilder is going to keep, they're going to identifying with their muscles, so they're going to keep bodybuilding, right? They're not doing themselves any good. I mean, muscle has its benefit, but when once you pass a threshold, it's like, you know, are these professional bodybuilders really helping themselves? I don't. Probably not, right? It's like certain amount of muscle, yes, wonderful, right? Like I do exercise, I do physical activity, and it's good for me. And muscle is good, muscle is healthy, right? I'm strong. I did 143 push-ups this morning, consecutive, right? I do sets, I do reps, I go for a long while. There's probably a lot more I could do that I'm not doing, but point is, muscle is good. Too much muscle is not good. Thinking is good. Too much thinking is not good, right? So those are the two aspects of carbohydrates: active thinking and high physical activity. But macros are basically, there are exceptions. There are people in macrobiotic community who do physical activity, right? But they are outliers. Most of them do jack shit. They're just walking, right? Or sitting around doing nothing, you know, mentally masturbating, right? Just being real with you. And so too much glucose has major problems, right? When you're constantly overloading the body with glucose, with carbohydrates, right? First of all, you get metabolic rigidity, meaning that you lose the ability to burn fat. Right? So therefore you have a hypoglycemic situation where when your blood sugar gets low, you're not burning any of the stored fats, and toxins are stored in the fat, right? So therefore you're getting very stagnated fat stores in your body over time, especially as you age, that are not getting burned up. Because the cells are completely conditioned to only burn carbohydrates, right? This is very real. You teach your cells to burn certain fuels. And if you're only teaching it to burn carbohydrates, and macrobiotics is, by fact, by definition, a grain-based diet. It's very heavy emphasizing that point, right? There is no macrobiotics without grain. Like some people might say there is, and they're probably doing it, but helping themselves. But macrobiotics, by definition, is a grain-based diet, right? So you're teaching your cells to only burn carbohydrates. Therefore, you're teaching your cells to not burn fat. Therefore, when you run out of blood sugar, you are hypoglycemic. And that's hangry. That's the intensity. When you have a low-fat diet, low protein, and then blood sugar gets low, it's crazy. It's so bad. I mean, I know because I lived it most of my life. because he's like shaking because you have nothing left. You're just, I need to eat now, right? So bad. It's so awful. I didn't know anything else, right? I didn't even know that the body could run on fat. Of course, I mean, it makes sense. Like, duh, people didn't always have grains. People just like hunt animals and eat, live off that. Of course, anyway, we can live off fat, right? And we have to teach our body, especially if we're recovering grainaholics, carbaholics, there's a learning curve, and we have to teach our body how to burn fat. And for that, going on a pure ketosis diet, even for a little while, it's probably necessary. But long run, carbs have their place, burning fat has a place. You want to be metabolically flexible. You want to be able to burn carbs. I'm not saying like just go full on ketosis forever. That's not the answer. It's not how I practice. And most of the literature says, no, that's not the way to go. Most of the scientists, doctors, researchers, nutritionists say, no, it's, we need a balance, right? Limit carbs, be flexible, right? Some carbs, healthy carbohydrates, and plenty of good quality fats also, because of the vitamins that you get from good quality fats. It's so much more nourishing and relaxing to the system when you're getting really good quality fat, right? And variety of different kinds of fats. I mean, olive oil is one of the best things. And sesame oil kind of has a bad rep, but because it's a seed oil, and it does have higher amounts of omega-6, but it has high levels of, it's very stable, first of all. If you refrigerate, it can last a very long time, which is wonderful. It's not saturated, and it has plenty of antioxidants. So sesame oil is also a good one. Butter definitely has its place. Coconut oil, and especially MCT oil, also really wonderful. But ghee, any case, good quality fats. Some people like avocado oil, some people like macadamia nut oil. All have their good qualities. Anyway, definitely get your good quality fats. So yeah, so on the macrobiotic diet, there's inevitably a nutritional deficiency, right? And weak muscles. You're either skin and bones and look like you just woke up from the grave 6 feet under, and you're just like, right? Or like Lurch from the Addams Family. That's a real thing, that the macrobiotic with no muscle, or you're bloated because you're just like going the other way and you're taking in way too much carbs, and you're just like, pretending like you're the fat Buddha, statue, and like, oh, you're so spiritual, you're bloated. No, I mean, not really. That's not a good look. But none of them have any muscle. I mean, very rarely. Again, there are outliers, people who probably eat a, more balanced diet and get plenty of exercise. But there's muscle loss because very limited protein, bone loss, leaky gut is huge. It's epidemic. I'm sure most don't even know it because they're probably too arrogant to study modern science and literature, and they're just in their own little world. But again, I have to tell the truth. My father had leaky gut. He had Hashimoto's thyroidism, thyroid autoimmune. He had severe psoriasis, and he's not the only one, right? I'm sure there's plenty of, I know several who have psoriasis, which is an autoimmune disease, which comes from leaky gut. Leaky gut comes from a lot of the grain and bean products, especially grain, excessive grain, especially wheat, rice, if it's not cooked properly, lectins. These plants have their own defenses. We have to realize that. Plants are not there for just to eat. They're not the buffet. Like, God didn't just be like, this is your food, it's perfect, all the plants, right? I mean, I know some people think that, but that's just not reality. Plants live for themselves, and they have their own reasons for living, and they have defenses. The seeds are there to be germinated. Therefore, they're meant to be ingested and not digested. Ingested, but not digested. Therefore, grains and beans and seeds are indigestible unless we make them digestible, right? So you have to understand that. They have protective coatings that will disrupt our digestion. And this causes leaky gut. Lectins cause leaky gut. They're in whole grains and beans and nuts and seeds, right? And unless you know how to prepare them and you do your due diligence, you're gonna have problems. Also, modern wheat is a real problem because it is much harder to digest. And if you're eating tons of pasta and bread, especially, even if it's organic bread, like the best is whole wheat sourdough, but modern wheat still is still hard to digest because it's been bred to be very different from traditional wheat. And so the lectins are much more prevalent. Modern wheat is very, very difficult to digest. So like pasta is really difficult, right? Pasta is not a health food for the lectins and the carbohydrates, right? And some people are just like, oh, I'm eating white, I'm eating relaxed, I'm going on a pasta diet because grain is, what we eat. That's unhealthy. That will get you. And I'm sorry to say that's basically my one of my father's go-tos pretty much regularly was pasta. Way too much wheat, way too much wheat. And he developed leaky gut and autoimmune thyroid and psoriasis and weakened his kidneys. He had tinnitus. His health really deteriorated because he just wasn't paying attention, and he had this certain arrogance that, because of these short-term successes of macrobiotics, that this was like, it was just like, he's so convinced that this was the right way that he wasn't really doing the proper research to find out, and he blamed, like, he just very important. He blamed all the deaths in macrobiotics on being too young. It was his oversimplification. He just like, oh, they're too young, they're too young. I need to be more eat, more eat. He just ended up weakening his condition and making himself very weak. And cancer is an immunity disease at the end of the day. Our immunity fights off cancer. But when our immunity gets low, then cancer can grow, right? And glucose feeds cancer. That's a fact. You can look that up. Glucose feeds cancer. A lot of cancers are just like, it's a one-to-one, like it's a direct relationship that glucose will feed cancer. And so one of the main strategies for overcoming cancer is cutting off glucose. But you can't do that when you're eating grain as your main food. In the macrobiotic diet, it's like grain at every meal, right? Which is carbohydrates, which is glucose. So, cancer is epidemic in the macrobiotic community among the long-timers, right? So among the things that macrobiotics is high in, which plant foods are high in, are lectins, which cause leaky gut. Lectins cause leaky gut. Like, let's not beat around the bush. Let's make no mistake about that. Lectins cause leaky gut. Phytates. Some phytates are good because they help chelate, like for heavy metals. But too much will deplete minerals, right? So then you get these very weak, frail macros. You think that it's like, it's very spiritual to have no muscle and no, just be like, oh, I'm so spiritual, right? They think that's wonderful. It's not wonderful. It's not wonderful to be like, flick here, like I beat you up like that, like break your bone just with a flick of a finger, right? That's not wonderful. I'm sorry. It's not good. Oxalates give you kidney stones. Macrobiotics have kidney stones, right? You have to know what foods have oxalates. Too much oxalates are very, very bad. They will bind with calcium and lodge in the kidneys as calcium oxalates and cause kidney stones. And then there are protease inhibitors, which mean that this is an enzyme that inhibits protein digestion. So again, this frailty issue, this muscle weakness, this gaunt skeletal look that all these macros, long-time macros, think is so wonderful. It's not. That's a sign that you're gonna die, right? You look like that, you're gonna die. Okay? You're gonna die young of ill health. You're not spiritual. That's not a spiritual look. Right? I have no muscle. I'm all skin and bones. That's not a good look. All right. So among other issues that come along with all these things are brain fog. When you have leaky gut, it's the brain gut connection. You have brain fog. I had terrible brain fog. and this is epidemic, I'm sure, among longtime macros. Low energy, tiredness, right? My energy is like a billion times better than it was, right? And but this is epidemic among macros. Oh, I'm so tired, I'm so tired, I'm so tired, I'm so tired. This is like, oh, okay. Macro disease, you're tired, okay. Osteoporosis, heart attack and stroke, that comes from B12 deficiency, which is also common among vegans, right? They're just ignoring all nutritional information, just think, oh, I can just eat all whatever junk food, vegan, as long as it's vegan, it's fine, right? And then they all love fried foods, fried and baked flour and baked things with oil, which whenever you dry heat oil and fat, you're compromising the integrity. And these oil makes up our cell membranes, right? With the kind of oil. So you're creating disturbed cells with all the fried food, which leads to cancer. You're deteriorating the oils. Fried foods deteriorate the oils, but so do baked foods, so do grilled foods. And this is true whether you're vegan or not vegan, macro, not macro, when they're frying hamburgers, frying steaks, grilling steaks, barbecue, all of that, smoked meat, smoked fish, you're deteriorating the fats and you're contributing to cancer, carcinogens in the body. Across the board, just bottom, there's no way to get around it. There's no way to get around that. Like as soon as you dry heat oil, you're degrading it. And just because you can get away with it for decades does not make it any worse or better. You're still having less quality cells. You're building your body through inferior oil, which is creating poor cell quality. And that is going to degrade your health over time and contribute to all-cause mortality. It's just a fact. Fried food is not healthy. Whether you're vegan, not vegan, anything, doesn't matter. Baked food with where there's any oil, where it's dry, it's not healthy. Grilled, barbecued, all that, not healthy. Definitely contributes to cancer. Okay, and macros love fried food because they feel so restricted with their heavily restricted diet that like every single meal they want fried foods, basically. Or like burnt seeds, like you just see that it's epidemic. Like burning the fat is just like a regular daily habit among many macros. It is, and they're contributing to cancer. So we already talked about vegan. Yeah, and then the macros, they're all poor and ineffective in the worldly way. Just basically, you can count on it. If you know a macrobiotic person, they've done zero impact on the world, or at the upper range, very little, right? The most effective macros are very low on the spectrum of effective people across the board. There are basically no effective, like just in just the big picture, no effective macros, none. I guess you could say like Michio Kushi had the most worldly effect, most worldly influence, and it was still very minimal compared to so many other people, right? Because he didn't have the proper nutrition. Yeah. Anyway, or maybe there's just not enough of them. That could be another thing. But generally, across the board, very, very underachievers. The macrobiotic community is underachievers. Initially, a lot of success. Long term, extreme underachievers. They all become weak. And they all become old looking. That's because glucose is very fiery and burns and causes aging. Because glucose, carbohydrates, which turn to glucose, burns quick. So you're causing cellular aging, cellular degeneration, because the intensity that carbohydrates burn within the body, right? It's high, it's oxidating. It creates oxidative stress over time when you have that much glucose. Constantly, macros look old. They look old and weak and sick. And I'm sorry, they do. As a general, like long time, and they die young. They have poor digestion. It's a very punitive mindset. Like, oh, we need to restrict, we need to deny ourselves. It's sort of like, you can think of like the early Christians like flagellating themselves. That's basically what macrobiotics is. It's like, I'm not good enough. I'm bad. I need to eat less, chew more, be pure vegan, then I'll be good enough for the macro gods, right? And then it's pseudo spiritual. They're all into like a very pseudo spirituality. Or if it's not pseudo spiritual, it's just hyper intellectual. Maybe they're more honest about it and they're just like, fuck spirituality. All we care about is our thinking, right? There's some who just like, we're just trying to develop our thinking. That's really everything, you know. Either way, it's not very well rounded. And it's dogmatic and arrogant. You know, again, this whole thing where we know better, we're right, they're wrong. We don't even need to listen to them. They don't know what they're talking about. We're grains. Grains is the food for humanity. How could you not see that? And let's focus on grain. Let's just obsess about grains and the different kinds of grains and which grain. And they're very close to science. They're very close to research. They're very close to modern nutrition. They think they know better. And they don't. They're less healthy. What's the bottom line? What are you doing it for? You're not more spiritual. You're not healthier. You know, well, like, macro, it's almost like incestuous because macros are congratulating themselves over their own thinking, right? Like, oh, well, we can think like this and blah, blah, blah. And I used to be in that camp and you'll hear things like, oh, like somebody like those, like, subtle, like jealous, like so-and-so, like somebody's successful out in the world and they'll be like, but they don't have food. They don't have food. What do you mean they don't have food? Everyone has food. Everyone eats. But it's sort of like this idea, like, we understand food. They don't. Very arrogant. All right. So that's why I no longer consider myself macrobiotic. However, as the saying goes, I don't want to throw away the baby with the bathwater. There are some good things within macrobiotics, which I'm going to mention here, that I definitely use and I definitely appreciate and love and value and take away. Yin-yang thinking and dialectics. Now, you can get away, like some people just rely too heavily on this, and it's an oversimplification because it's dividing everything into two, right? So it's extremely useful on the one hand. On the other hand, if you're only relying on it, it's just like, it's kind of dumb. It's like, that can't be your only tool in your toolbox. You can't just, rigidly oversimplify everything to that and just hold it, because it's like, heroin and sugar and lettuce are all in, but I mean, it's like there's vast differences. And alcohol, right? Like, so if somebody's too young, oh, you're too young, that's it, bottom line, you're too young, you need in. So just all the in things, like, no, okay, we need a lot more nuance than that. There's a lot more to it. Or you're too in, you need young. Well, so many things that are young, like salt, meat, activity, restriction, pressure cooked short grain brown rice. I mean, there's so many different ways you could go about root vegetables, burdock, right? And it's like, oh, you're too in. Oh, eat a handful of salt. Well, that'll kill somebody, right? Or go on a carnivore diet. Well, that's ridiculous. I know I've seen people on a carnivore diet. I'm definitely not interested in being like them. So this oversimplification, but yin and yang is incredibly valuable if you put it into context. It's great to be able to see things in polar opposites, right? Night, day, yin, yang, hot, cold, masculine, feminine, contraction, expansion. There's so many different things. And it's great for being able to exercise your mind that way and to think in terms of yin and yang and to identify yin versus yang, what's more yin, what's more yang in comparison, right? I use it, but I have to put it in context, right? I don't only use it. And similarly, archetypes. I mean, and this is where astrology meets food. Astrology is like almost purely archetypal, whereas food is falls into archetypal categories, right? We can put different foods into, Asians have the 5 transformations, right? It's metal, wood or tree, fire, soil or earth, and metal, water, tree, or wood, fire, soil, right? Circular, and then you have uh, the five-pointed star, which is the what's it called? That's the overriding, the one, you know, one sign override one transformation overrides the other, like metal chops down tree. Tree grows in soil and uses soil. Soil soaks up water and blocks water. Water puts out fire. Fire melts metal. Right? And then there's the circular way where it's supported, right? It's not a 5 transformation lesson, but these are archetypes, and we can categorize food into every single category. Like grains are metal, right? Beans we consider more water, also seaweed and fish. Tree, all the upward growing plants, right? Fire, the spices and sugar and things like that. Soil, meat, you know, certain sweet vegetables, right? Have more settling quality. So anyways, and then we get into food energetics. This is really where macrobiotics excels. All these things are where macrobiotics excels, but this is one of the uniquenesses that within macrobiotic thinking that is way ahead of the curve, right? Modern nutritional research is really just starting to learn between the gut-brain connection, the microbiome, how these microbes, which we have trillions of, are influencing everything in our brain, like our thinking, our mood, our metabolism, our all kinds of things, our muscles, our bones. They influence so much, right? You know, obesity, or being thin, fat metabolism, right? And then each food will have its own specific bacteria that go along with it. But we know that in macrobiotics that each food is going to influence the thinking, but it's the same thing, right? If a food has a very specific bacteria that it needs to digest it, or several, and that bacteria is influencing the thinking, it's the same, right? We knew this a long time ago, that food influences the mind and the emotions and everything. Food influences everything. Food is information, right? And this is very important to understand. Food is information. And when you say you are what you eat, I mean, that's very literal, right? Food carries a certain energetic quality that goes above and beyond, in fact, what they know of as the gut brain connection, the microbiome. And I could make a whole video about that, but it's very nuanced, very profound, and very real, right? Food highly influences who we are as a person, and deeply influences our mind, our subconscious. And this goes back to what I was saying in the beginning, how we're programming our subconscious through deficiency over long term to really tell ourselves that we cannot perform in the world in a deeply subconscious way, right? And that's so debilitating, so disempowering. On the other hand, when we nourish ourselves really with a full, broad, healthy diet, including animal food, without demonizing animal food, saying, oh, you're not spiritual if you eat animal food, which is nonsense, right? I am trying to be in the world. I'm not trying to be a monk, right? If I was a monk, it would be a different situation. I'm just being honest with myself. I'm not lying. I'm not bullshitting myself, right? I am trying to make money in the world. And therefore, I do need to compete in the world. Therefore, I do need to resonate. And therefore, I do need animal food. I need enough nutrition to compete and to deliver the messaging to my subconscious that I can compete with all these other people who are also eating plenty of animal food, right? And I can do it, and I can have success. I can make money, right? And that's messaging. And that's why food is information, right? And it works, and it is. I'm experiencing very real results, right? Even in just a short time, it works. I'm telling you, it works. Food is information, and you know, you're programming yourself. It's one of the most profound things that, I mean, when science really catches up with this, it'll change. It will empower humanity so much. I'm not, my background is not in outer space for nothing. I do know some things, right? So this is very real. Food is information. And if you want to reach your subconscious mind, reprogram your subconscious mind, there's nothing more powerful than food. Understanding food, right? And understanding how to program yourself, right? And it's not just the sum of the parts, right? It's not just, we break down it, like different like foods into their different nutrients, and like you cannot put Humpty Dumpty back together again. You cannot just say, these are the nutrients that go into this food, therefore we'll just take these nutrients and have that food. No, a whole food is a whole food. Whether it's, grains, beans, nuts, seeds, vegetables, fish, eggs, cheese, yogurt, milk, meat, whatever it is, the whole food is the whole food. And there's a difference. There's an energetic difference. There's an energetic difference even if you're talking about cow meat, which has been farmed, and bison meat, which has also been farmed, but bison are a different animal and they have been more recently wilded. Or if you're talking about venison, even venison that has been farmed but has still retained its natural instincts because it's not been farmed for generations. And then even that, between farmed venison, even if the diet is very similar, and wild venison, right? Or farmed fish and wild fish, there's energetic, yeah, you're talking about like nutritional, but even if you like matching like the highest quality farmed versus wild, you're still getting very energetic difference, right? Or farmed vegetables versus wild vegetables, right? I love getting wild dandelions and plantains and burdock and all, and what else? Mugwort, because these wild vegetables are going to have a different effect on myself and my mind and my immunity. They're going to make me much stronger. I mean, because these are very mature vegetables. They don't need anyone to, I mean, they're not babies. They're just like you can try and kill them, they're still going to survive. These are very, very strong vegetables. You're getting that energetic quality when you're getting the energetic quality of whatever you're eating, right? So if you get like the most pampered, weak vegetables that are so susceptible to disease that they need all kinds of chemicals and coddling, and everything is like manhandled, and like you're getting very, very weak, low energy kind of food. But if you're getting wild vegetables that just like, despite everything that like we throw at them to try and kill them, they're still thriving and surviving. Those are the most potent vegetables, right? I'm not talking about dandelions that are growing beside the city road, because that's full of chemicals. But dandelions are so tough that they can survive. So is burdock. So is violet leaves. So are plantains. So is mugwort. All of these, or semi-wild ones where you seed once and they just take over. Like garlic chives are like that, and there's probably plenty of others. Daylily bulbs, right? They're like that too. So you see, like you have to look at the energetic nature of food, and that's how you build strength, right? In any case, food energetics, macrobiotics taught me that. And it's very profound and very real. The macrobiotic thinking is very profound. Building connections, understanding how one thing connects to the other. Eating whole grain does help build connections if you soak it and pressure cook it with kombu. Kombu obviously has high levels of glutamate and iodine. Kombu seaweed helps repair the gut, so whatever damage the grain may cause, you're repairing it at the same time. It's also the reason why they have Japanese noodles and broth, where it's kombu shiitake, extremely high levels of glutamate. Glutamate repairs the gut. Or bone broth, where they have pho, Vietnamese noodle soup. It's bone broth. Bone broth also repairs the gut, and you get the grain noodles. And this is poor people's food. This is one of the reasons why they did that, because they had to eat the grain, because they didn't really have. You couldn't just live off animal food. There wasn't enough animal food to go around. There wasn't. Right? Animal food is rich people food. Now we're in a place where society, we can all be rich. We can all eat plenty of animal food. Now, I'm not saying to be on like a meat heavy diet, but I'm saying we can have complete nourishment. We don't have to live like poor people, which is basically what a grain-based diet is. It's living like poor people, and then you get the results. You get poor. Like if you're tired of being poor, get off macrobiotics, because that macrobiotics will make you poor, right? And weak and sick. And it's a poor person's diet. It's plain. I'm telling you straight. It's a poor person's diet. And every single macro is poor, basically. There are exceptions, obviously, but their money comes from before. And if they continue macrobiotics, they will die for it. So probably. And then, the individual foods, there's so many individual foods that are associated with macrobiotics. Really, these are traditional, high quality Japanese foods, right? So let's just call it what it is. But the awareness comes from macrobiotics, the teaching that these are very wonderful foods, right? Like miso, shoyu, natto, tempeh. Tempeh is Indonesian, but still fermented soy. Umeboshi, shiso, seaweed, right? All the different mushrooms, all the different cooking styles, many wonderful cooking styles, right? Are taught in macrobiotics. All wonderful. If you understand them in context, when and how to use them, like you don't want to eat like a Japanese because they eat so much salt, right? Very restrictive, but you have to be Japanese and live in Japan, and even then you're still living in the modern world, so you need a moderate. Now they eat so much sugar and chemicals. So in any case, there's many wonderful things that came out of macrobiotics, especially relating to those things. And lastly, what I greatly appreciate about macrobiotics are the friends that I've made. I do appreciate many of the macrobiotic community, not all of them, but many, and the experiences and memories, right? Young people do much better with macrobiotics. So do people who just starting out first number of years, when they're cleaning out all their excesses. And yeah, the experiences and the memories, wonderful memories, great memories. Not all of them, but a lot of them, right? But growth and change is the name of the game. If you're not growing and changing in life, then you're not doing it right. Like, don't, stick to something forever. Like, we all need to grow. We all need to change. We all need to let go. We all need to, shed our old skin and outgrow outdated models that don't work anymore. And times they change, and, we have to change too. So don't be sentimental. Sentimentality will get you killed, right? I don't care that I grew up macrobiotic and now that I'm like, I'm done. I don't consider myself macrobiotic. I don't care, right? I can still value the people who I value and appreciate what came from it, take what came from it, and just be done with it, right? That's life. Let's move on. Let's keep growing. Let's keep evolving. Evolution is the name of the game. And I feel better. I look better. I'm healthier. And my life is improving. Right? So that's what's important. So with that, I leave you. And I hope you found this valuable. And of course, some people will be like, macrobiotics is, that is quotes, this is say, macrobiotics is endlessly adaptable. This is not, how much does it cost you to write some, nice sounding bullshit, right? Nothing, big fucking deal. It's plain, it's see-through as anyway. Never mind the idiots. All right. That's it for now. And I will see you again soon. And yeah, happy trails. All right. Bye.